Hello and welcome to How to Citizen. I'm Meghnad and this is chapter 4 we are talking about. Today we have a very interesting guest, Mr. Abbas Momin, who is a comedian, and we had a very wonderful conversation about understanding laws. We asked questions like, what do laws even mean? What makes Abbas care about laws? I mean, seriously, why do they even matter? How laws become important only when they affect Abbas's life, professionally and personally. And ours too. And I guess yours too. We had a conversation about how Shazia and Kusum are having a conversation in a comic, in the chapter. That was fun. And finally, we have a conversation about should citizens criticize unpopular laws or just go along with whatever they are being told to do so, like sedition. Sedition is a fun subject, I must say. I hope you enjoy this episode of How to Citizen. Let's get schooling and let's get schooled. Hello listeners, we are on episode 4 of How to Citizen and we are today dealing with chapter 4.
Understanding laws.
So Shreyas is here with me and we have our special guest, Abbas Momin. Hi Abbas.
Hi Meghnad and Shreyas.
Hi. So Abbas, if you can quickly introduce yourself first.
Alright, my name is Abbas Momin. I am 30 years old. I am a stand-up comic and a producer at IVM Podcasts. I like to do fun stuff. Should I just go into my hobbies now? I like to listen to music, watch YouTube. I used to be a freelance journalist and writer.
Right.
But yeah, last year and a half, I've been a producer at IVM Podcasts.
Alright.
Okay, now first of all, let's get to business. How are you as a student? Tell us that.
I was a fairly decent student. I used to do well in language and social studies. I was terrible at math. I got just the passing mark in math in my 10th standard exam, which I'm pretty sure the examiner gave grace marks just so that I don't fail. So I was a decent student. I wasn't the class topper, but I wasn't in the bottom either.
So you were like the average Joe.
Yeah.
Average Joe.
Yeah.
Like a lot of average Joes must be listening to this
Right.
podcast. I'm guessing.
Shout out to all the average Joes.
Also, to be fair, Shreyas was a alpha male topper in his school.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not proud of that. Those are days that I don't want to talk about. Those are days that I've just spent studying for nothing. So I wish I could
So
be
then-
an average Joe like you.
Yeah, I was just about to say we're even then. Like the average Joe and the topper at the same platform.
Okay, then let's take it forward from there. Just tell us how your social studies teacher was. And do you specifically remember 8th grade teacher, 9th grade teacher, any social studies teacher?
So our teachers from 8th to 10th for social studies were the same.
Right.
We had 2 teachers. We had one for history and civics,
Right.
and we had one for geography and economics. And both of them were the principal and the vice principal of the school. So history and civics was dealt by the vice principal. His name was Mr. Balasubramaniam. And the geography and economics was by a principal whose name was Mr. John Christodos.
Okay.
And both of them had very radically different methods of teaching. I really used to like our history teacher. I think Mr. Balasubramaniam was very forthcoming, very to the point with what he wanted to teach. And I thought that the history and civics classes were the ones where we had a bit of a debate. It wasn't just a one-way conversation where the teacher is telling you what to study and you're studying it. He used to ask us questions, he used to ask us opinions about what do you think about this particular incident that happened, what do you think about this particular incident. And geography and economics was just the opposite. The principal used to come, just make us, ratify the thing and pass the exam. That was it.
So did you use a version of this book when you were studying? So you were
I was in 8th standard in 2001.
But
so
you were CBSE board.
I was CBSE.
And he was a fairly average student, so I doubt he remembers the textbook that he
So
used when he was
what
in
all
8th
do you...
grade.
So when you read this chapter again, did
Yeah.
you remember anything? Did anything come back?
It's just the dull language that our textbooks use, where it's just like there is no attempt to try and inculcate any sort of enthusiasm in the student. It's just like, dekho ye hai, this is what it is. You should know about these things. And yeah, certain words and phrases that you hadn't heard in a while. But I have to say, you told me this is a fairly recent version of the textbook that you gave me. So it's a little more it's a little more colorful. Like there are questions peppered with questions, more images. I don't remember being that many images in my textbook when I was a student. But yeah, it's still pretty much the same whole lesson of our textbook.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you know how there should be a difference between the church and the state? In the same way, do you think there should be a difference between history and civics? Because I think if you read this civics
Which one is
chapter,
the church? Between the two of them?
Civics is clearly the church.
Okay.
because I think if you read a civics textbook,
Right.
knowing the history of the country,
Right.
there's just so much dissonance. There just seems to be so much difference between what these books want us to think about the government and
Right.
what is actually happening.
I never really understood the similarity or the connection between history and civics. I never really. It was just two subjects that were clubbed together. You'll have 70 marks history, 30 marks civics.
Right.
And I never really questioned that these two are related. That the history that we're reading has to be in some ways applied to this. So your question was, should it be taught separately?
Should it be taught separately? Yeah,
It
not
is-
by the same teacher. I just don't trust teachers who teach both history and civics. I'm very-
Why wouldn't you trust them? There is nothing to trust, dude. You don't trust teachers, period. No, but seriously,
I'm okay with either way. If it is being taught together, then the connection between the two should be more
Should be, right, right. Absolutely.
emphasized on more.
Absolutely,
I
right.
feel.
Absolutely.
And so let's get into the chapter.
Let's get
If you're ready for this, right?
Yeah.
To get into the chapter, though, we want to set a scene,
Okay.
right? We are not teachers,
Okay.
right? You are not a student. You are not a
Definitely
teacher, and we
not,
are
yeah.
not students,
Yeah.
right? Right, but what we want to do is basically just describe a place that you used to, hang out with your friends in school.
Where would you be before a test? Were you the kind of student who would be studying in class? Were you the kind of student who's just chilling, taking toilet breaks? What's your life
We
like?
would be studying, but not in the class. I
Yeah.
remember clearly. So most students chill in the canteen,
Right.
but we didn't used to chill in the canteen. There was a small space outside of the canteen on the stairs, and that's where me and my friends used to sit and sort of revise stuff right before an exam or a day before the exam. So yeah, I have that memory.
You
very
have that
fresh.
vivid memory.
Yes.
So
we are
basically, we are now sitting on stairs.
Exactly.
Basically.
Sure.
Guys, listeners, we are sitting on stairs.
Outside
Imagine
the
us on
canteen.
stairs.
Yeah, can we actually get a quick snack before we start from the canteen? Or should we just, okay, we don't have enough time. Okay, let's just get started.
For a more immersive experience, guys, log on to ivmpodcast.com/how-to-citizen, where you will see a drive link which will have this chapter which we are dealing with right now. Please go and download it and read it with us, because if you want an immersive experience, you will be able to have it. You will also find the same link in the description of this episode wherever you listen to your podcast, on Google, on Apple, on Stitcher, on, wherever you want. So please look at this chapter once if you want, or what you can do is you can just listen to it right now and not do the effort. But later, when you want to re-listen to it, please do it with the book. There will be a completely new experience. So yeah, the chapter is called Understanding Laws. I'm just going to read the introduction page, right? You may be familiar with some laws such as those that specify the age of marriage, the age at which a person can vote, and perhaps even the laws dealing with buying and selling property.
Because these are the three things that every student is concerned about. Buying property, getting married, and voting.
Yeah, why not? Marriage, of course.
I had no idea though there's an age limit to buying and selling property.
Yeah,
I
I know there is. Because you need to be able to make contracts, right? So, yeah.
I guess.
Hey guys, should we sell off this canteen behind us? What do you think?
No one will buy it. The food is stale.
So it goes on. We now know that the parliament is in charge of making laws. That was in the previous chapters. Do these laws apply to everyone? How do new laws come into being? Could there be laws that are unpopular or controversial? What should we as citizens do under such circumstances?
I want to start off with one question, Abbas. This chapter is called Understanding Laws.
Right.
Can you tell me about the laws that you just don't understand?
There's so many. Right off the top of my head, any law?
Any law.
Okay.
Any law.
Any blanket. Any law that you don't understand.
This is out of syllabus, sir.
Acha, listen, we gave you this chapter.
Right.
It has few laws in there also, right?
It does.
I hope you have.
I hope you
I
understand
made
those
notes.
at least.
I sort of did, but I have questions about those as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So you don't know basically any law right now.
Yes, I don't. I'm a law-abiding citizen, but I don't know what I am abiding under.
So
yeah.
let me ask you this question in a different way then.
Sure.
Are there any specific laws that you had to go through or had to encounter because of just living in India? Or you just ended up reading randomly?
No, I mean, like I said, I'm a stand-up comedian, right? So I have to be fairly up to date about what the laws say about freedom of speech. Yeah.
Of course you do.
Because my material does deal quite a bit with religion and
Right.
authoritative figures and
Right.
governments. So far, touching all the wood I can. Nobody, I'm not that big of a comedian, but till now nobody has taken offense, or I've not gotten into any hot water because of my jokes. But at the back of my head, I always have this question looming of what I said. Where does it fall under the law? And tomorrow, if someone does take offense on it, how much of a shit I will be in.
So what did you find?
Again, I found this from another fellow comedian
Right.
where he said that the freedom of speech laws come with 8 exceptions.
Right.
Where you cannot offend, especially when it comes to religious, hurting anybody's religious sentiments is a sort of a dicey situation.
Right.
Like, and in India, the momentum is always with the person who has taken offense rather than the one who has caused the offense.
Yeah.
So those are some of the very broad things I know about
Right.
freedom of speech and freedom of expression in India. But yeah, some. I mean, we've had comedians get into trouble because they put dog filters on a politician's photo.
True.
So,
Yeah.
I know.
Who was he insulting there, by the way? Was he insulting anyone? He put.
I think he was.
Sorry.
I think he was insulting the.
I just remembered what you were talking about.
I think he was insulting the comedy scene. That's what.
No. Adarniya Modi ji. Just saying. I added Adarniya. I don't get into trouble because of that. That's a code word, by the way. Whenever you mention Adarniya Modi ji, you don't get into trouble.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
I thought
I'll do that in my comedy routine then before every
I
joke.
thought we were talking about Tanmay Bhatt. Do we have to use Adarniya for him too?
He will get into trouble on our behalf. But okay. So basically you have tried to understand laws. That's great.
Yes.
But that's really interesting, right? Like, as a professional, as a comedian, he specifically had to look at freedom of speech laws because he got into trouble.
Or I might one day. I don't know, yeah.
Like basically, so now if you think about it, people only start understanding laws if it will affect them negatively.
Absolutely. Like you only really know a law when you break it. I really
That's a nice way to put it. But in this chapter, however, they do not say it.
Yeah, you can't break laws.
can't-
We
you
don't
can't
condone breaking laws of any
break it.
kind.
And also, if a law suddenly comes into focus, like for example, we're recording this in October, and last month Section 377 was scrapped, right? So those kind of things come right in the front page, so you
Right.
cannot
Right.
ignore those
Right.
those laws. And so, there was a law like this, now it has been scrapped. So yeah,
So
generally-
suddenly it's on your face, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, so I will just ask a very general question to you
Sure.
now, which is after reading this chapter, what is the sense that you get? What did you learn anything new, and what is the sense that you get from the overall chapter?
Did I learn anything new? I have to say, not really. The sense that I got is it gives a very basic idea of how laws are passed, and it speaks a little about how the British used to enforce their laws,
Right.
and how some nationalists made sure that we got some of it in our favor, but not quite.
Right.
So the two things that stand out, of course, is the how we were treated under the British rule, and then there's a beautiful comic strip which talks about how laws are passed.
Right.
So those are the two major things that sort of stood out for me. How laws are passed and how we got the laws that we kind of have. So yeah.
So basically, the chapter talks about how there is a misconception.
Right.
That British colonialists were the ones who introduced the rule of law in India, right? And now after that they go on to explain how basically no, that's wrong. Indian nationalists were the one who evolved it, right?
Right.
And nationalists, not the current ones, the ones
Freedom
previously.
fighters,
Freedom fighters, yes. So it's very weird also, right? Like if they're using the word nationalist now, you're like, तब भी लोग थे ऐसे. It's a little weird.
It's so funny that the word freedom is so unfamiliar to you that you can't even pronounce freedom.
But I would like to disagree with this portion a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think our laws, get ready for it, were evolved through religion.
Really?
Yeah.
And how's that?
Think about it. Like, religion was always a way for, through stories, to tell society how to behave.
Sure.
Morally.
Yeah.
You can't steal, you can't do this, you can't do this. You have to read the Gita, and then, there is like a
Yeah.
whole moral chapter there, how morality works,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
So don't you think those were actually the initial laws which were there in society?
So you're taking like way back,
Yeah.
like ancient times.
Yeah.
Sure, that's one way to
I
look
mean,
at it.
how do you define laws? Let's, because this is about understanding laws, I would
Right.
like to know how you define laws. What are laws really? Shreyas?
Laws are something that keep you in check. Laws are something where you draw a line when it comes to something. And I really like, when it comes to law, I really like Kant's definition of a law, where he talks about the categorical imperative, where he says that a law has to be conditional, a law has to be objective and rationally necessary. So
Okay.
that is the definition of law that I abide by.
You
I want
pulled
to abide by.
Immanuel Kant on me right now.
I was like, was this in the chapter?
Yeah.
I don't remember
Listen,
reading
if we
Kant.
were sitting on the stairs and he said this shit, we would beat him up. Like, seriously. Immanuel Kant said this. I'm like, तू 8th grader है भाई. क्यों बात कर रहा है Immanuel Kant के बारे में? But yeah, imperative, la la la. Yeah. Smart. Abbas?
Yeah, I would kind of say it's sort of an imaginary line where, like, if you go beyond this point, you're crossing some sort of boundary which is not socially acceptable to behave in such a way. But that line is different for different scenarios.
Right.
So you have to take every case differently into consideration, right? That's as simply as I can put it.
Right.
Where, like, this is the boundary beyond which it's not socially this behavior is not socially acceptable.
Is it socially acceptable or is it legally acceptable?
It's legally not acceptable because the society has problem with it, or it would not be good for society.
But then what do you have to say about unpopular laws which don't have the social support?
It's probably unpopular because a bigger portion of people have a problem with it, but still in the purview of things, a major part of society is still uncomfortable with that.
Right.
So in like very crude terms,
Right.
since we are children, guys, you keep forgetting we are children. We are in
No
school.
child would say
For
crude
us,
though.
for us,
But sure.
for us, the laws would be you should cut your hair short and keep your clean
Cut your
shoes
hair,
clean.
cut your nails.
Yeah, that is basically law for us right now because the authority figure is the
school.
which
Is the
is supposed to implement
Yeah.
it, right? So
But isn't the authority before the school? There are laws at home as well, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wake
What-
up on time, sleep on time, don't watch too much TV.
Yeah, don't watch MTV.
Yeah.
Don't watch English shows.
What are the laws that you have at your home? When did you wake up? What was the waking up time?
Our school started at 8:45, so we used to wake up around 7:30.
Oh, that's late. Yeah. That's late. Yeah.
That's late?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. But
we
okay.
lived in Nagpur, so we had much harsher laws there.
Okay. Really?
Both of
Why
us
you-
come from Nagpur, by the way.
Did you go into those RSS shakhas that were run?
Aren't we still there? I thought
Now all of us are
All
in
of
some way
us.
or the other. But yes, 7:30.
Right.
7:30.
So the chapter clearly says that basically, that the violation of law shouldn't happen. So the
Right.
Constituent Assembly basically agreed on one very important principle, that there should be no arbitrary exercise of power in independent India, right?
Yeah.
And the implementing authority has to be the government, right? So in our analogy, it will be the school, right?
Right.
Like in our, and not really the school, because school is a building ultimately, but it's the institution we are talking about.
Yeah.
So the teachers would be the one who will be passing it on to monitors. Monitors will be like the police who will be like
Right.
pulling people up
Right.
and throwing laws at them, right? Or misusing their power.
Yeah, that's also possible.
That's
Yeah.
also possible. So essentially, that is what this chapter is about, right? What do you think?
I think the question we should be thinking about is, even when it comes to a school or a house or the government, who are the laws benefiting?
Right.
Who's benefiting from the law?
Right.
Is it citizens? Is it the people in power? Is it the people who are marginalized?
So here again, there is a nice line here is like what the rule of law means is that all laws apply equally to all citizens of the country. No one can be above the law, right? Essentially. But do you think that is the truth?
No, it isn't. There are certain biases which do creep in, and certain sections of society are treated more harshly, I think, even by the law, than some others, which enjoy a privileged status. If I can quote, Sanjay Rajora does this show called Aisi Taisi Democracy,
right,
where he actually says that since the independent India, only of all the hangings that have happened, people who have gotten death penalty, I think he says there's only been one higher caste Brahmin who's ever been hanged, which was, I think, Nathuram Godse. I mean, apart from that, there hasn't been any hanging where a higher caste person has been hung. It's usually the more people from the minorities or lower castes, those kind of people, right? So the law also tends to...
You mean there's an inherent bias there?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
As quote unquote equal it is.
That
some biases do creep in no matter what.
Okay, Abbas, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's probably... it's my favorite question format for sure. It's true or false.
Okay.
The statement is, the law cannot discriminate between persons on the basis of their religion, caste or gender. True or false?
True.
Yeah, that sounded like a joke. Like, and when you think about it, you process it. True, but...
Yeah.
But... you have to add a statement.
I mean, you don't think that's true?
I think the law does discriminate between...
I mean, it's not supposed to. If you're asking me the textbook definition of true or false, it's true. But like I said, there are always biases that will creep in.
You should change the name of this game to ambiguous statements, true or false.
Sarcastic true or false.
And you should keep a maybe. Maybe.
Oh, that's totally true. It's like a sarcastic way.
On a scale of 1 to 10, rate this statement. Okay, but do you have any more statements?
No, but I like this game, sarcastic true or false. I'll keep working on more.
Okay, so in this basically when we are talking about arbitrariness of law,
so I had to look up the meaning of the word arbitrary in the dictionary for this, and the thing that came out was, I think, random. That it's at things at random. Okay, cool. Yeah, please continue.
So they have used a very fun example, which I think you also would care about, is sedition. Yeah,
at least 1 5-mark question. Easy.
Yeah, of course.
Easily. Yeah, मतलब British rule का जो है, British rule का जो law बनाया हुआ है.
Yeah.
What did you get out of this? Like, what did you understand out of this?
So they mentioned this law, sedition law from 1870, where essentially if anyone said anything against the British government, they could be arrested and they could be arrested and punished without any trial.
Right.
And I was like, so what has changed since then?
Nothing.
So in basic terms, yeah, I mean, I think they give a more detailed definition of sedition later on, which I've completely forgotten. But the sense that I've gotten is anything a person says which the government thinks threatens is risky or may cause some sort of pandemonium. Right. That person should be arrested and put in prison. Right. So how correct am I?
And yeah, it is actually very, very close.
5.5 on 5.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, where the points don't matter. This is how to citizen where the points don't matter. So actually you were right, because they have given a glossary in the end. They have defined sedition, and they say this applies to anything that the government might consider as stirring up resistance or rebellion against it. So government might consider stirring up resistance.
The words I liked was, I was looking at the first sedition arrest, and the words they used was exciting feelings of ill will, which I think is a really fun phrase.
It's a good band name.
Yeah, that's actually a very good band name.
Yeah, exciting feelings of ill will. It's rebellious, it's sexy.
Yeah.
There's
like a musicality to it.
Yeah,
there's a rhythm to
it.
So, Shreyas, have you ever excited any feelings of ill will?
Excited any feelings of ill will?
Ill will, right? Not ill will.
Will.
Is it will or well?
No, ill will.
will.
Okay.
So my handwriting is a little dubious, so I don't know.
The good thing you only read it. Your handwriting
My
will-
handwriting. I think it's ill will. It's
Yeah,
ill will.
ill will.
Have I generated any feelings of ill will? Definitely have on stage while doing stand-up comedy.
Okay.
But not in the way that I wanted. Not in like a laughter rage, like a fit of laughter that people are having. More in like a, this is just so cringeworthy and disgusting. In that way. So not in the way that I want to. Have you, as a stand-up comic, what do you think? What do you think about ill will?
No.
Stored feelings of ill will.
Never. That's never the intention. Now, if
Right.
someone takes it on their will very personally, then it's. I mean,
Very arbitrary,
Very
as we said.
arbitrary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because you know how who was the first person who was charged with sedition?
who?
Bal Gangadhar Tilak.
Really?
Yeah. And then Gandhi was charged with
Yeah.
sedition, and he said that it's a privilege to be charged with sedition because every person should have a right to criticize their government
Right.
as long as they're not inciting any offense. That is what his words were. And then, funnily enough, Nehru was against Nehru. Ah! Yeah, we have to make rage noises whenever we mention Nehru. So Nehru was also in opposition with sedition, right? And then 17 years ke liye he was prime minister, right? Did not do anything about it. And then ironically, the recent case of sedition is against students who are named after a university after his name.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Exactly, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's an 1870 law जिसका इतना बड़ा history है और अभी भी है और civics book में भी दिया है.
No, but so this 1870 law is the one that still exists
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
literally.
Yeah, it
There have
is.
been no changes to that.
No.
No amendments, right?
So
Nothing.
the thing is, it's a reasonable restriction, right? So you described the free speech law, which is absolutely correct, right?
Right.
So we have some reasonable restrictions under Article 19 of the Constitution,
Okay.
right? One of them is sedition,
Okay.
which means that if you are basically, as they have given the definition, the government might consider stirring resistance or rebellion against it.
Right.
Now, so the funny thing here is though, right? You have to also understand when sedition applies. Sedition by itself is arbitrarily applied, as
Okay.
you have said. But when you are saying that you are doing a rebellion against the government, in real senses, every 5 years we do rebellions against the government by voting against
voting.
it, because every government changes, right? You know, but what
that's happening with the government's consent, right?
that is happening under the law because it is a freedom of expression also.
Right.
Voting is a freedom.
Right.
But what is interesting here is that if you are rebelling against the state, which means, the judges, the bureaucracy, the gardener who tends to Rashtrapati Bhavan gardens, the B grade officer, C grade officer, जो भी government का पूरा structure है.
Right.
If you want a downfall of that and in violent ways you are doing it, now that is sedition. Right?
Okay.
That is supposed to be like a seditious act.
Okay.
Because Gandhi was charged with sedition because obviously British the, right? But for instance, people like Kanhaiya Kumar are charged with sedition for shouting slogans.
Right.
There's a difference, like, to put it mildly.
Right.
So
But isn't the government's reasoning that him shouting these slogans will again incite feelings in the youth, which will make them go against what the country stands for?
So again, the definition, again, as I said, the definition of the state versus the definition of the government.
Right.
So if a government is in power you don't like, you have every right to try to pull it down.
Yeah.
Right. As a citizen, you criticize it, but if you want to fight elections, you are in a way doing a rebellion against the present establishment, like which is the government, right? Elected government.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely fair. Right. But the moment it was said that it is he's going to do some, as you put it, like he's going to incite some feelings which are against the country.
Yeah.
What they mean is that he's against the structure of our democracy itself,
Right.
which is not true.
Okay.
So that is.
I also think when you say against what the country stands for, we really need to think about.
I mean, I should have phrased it differently, but
Yeah.
as in, essentially what they're trying to say is that they are chanting slogans which want a part of land which is in our country to be taken off.
Right.
And we...
Tukde Tukde Gang.
Yeah.
Tukde Tukde.
Also a great band name.
You know, I was thinking, Tukde Tukde Gang, Republic uses this a lot, right? On their channel.
Yeah.
Translate it to English.
Peace
Gang.
Peace guy.
Oh, wow.
Fun.
Are they subversively
I
being
didn't get
peaceful?
that. What is peace gang?
Peace. So Tukda is a piece.
Oh, that way.
But if you say peace gang, it means, hey man, these are peaceful folk.
Hey, Meghnad, are you a Republic apologist? Is that what you are? Trying to find a peace message in their
But
program.
the whole point of this chapter is that sedition is bad.
Yeah.
But it's still there. It's still there. Yeah.
Sedition is bad, but then a number of times they mention that as a democracy, you have all the right to voice your disapproval of being, being against something.
Right.
So yeah, it tries to walk both the lines, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's essentially it. And that is the confusing part about this chapter also, right? You know, in a way they are saying that British had this sedition law which was arbitrarily used. Then they say it still exists.
Yeah.
Then in the next paragraph they are saying ki, you can criticize your government. But what if the government thinks that you're criticizing the country?
Yeah, it doesn't address.
Like, I think what we need to define is what is the country. When people say going against the country, do you mean the citizens? Do you mean the government? Do you mean the ruling party? And that's what I get.
I think, I would always go with the term anti-establishment rather than just against the country or whatever.
Right.
Like because when you are going against a certain establishment you don't agree with, right? No, that is legitimate, right? Because every journalist is supposed to be anti-establishment, right? And that purely means that you're criticizing and pointing out holes in the functioning of the establishment or the government or the system, right? And how it's not working.
Right.
I think that is the correct way to put it. But when you say, again, I'll go back to the word they've used here also, nationalist.
Yeah.
You know? When you start equating that to like a national, image, like, oh, nation hai, respect karna padta hai, flag वगैरह सब जो symbols है, they attach it with that. कोई भी उसको insult किया तो फिर, वो गलत है. So anything you criticize, anything, for instance, if you are criticizing, say, a law being passed like Aadhaar, right, which is a shit law, right? Now immediately they will come up with, अच्छा तू तो corrupt आदमी है, मतलब तू against the nation है, मतलब तेरे पे sedition, anti-national, right? And that is essentially the problem, the simplification. But that's the thing, right? When you read this, right, you understand why that simplification exists. I think, right? And probably we should also think about this more a little bit.
Do you think it's the textbook's responsibility to also mention how this sedition law is now being weaponized against activists in colleges? Like, do you think that is something that a textbook should be teaching?
I think
students?
that's the teacher's responsibility more than
Right.
What do you think?
I do, but then again, if a teacher says this and the next day a bunch of parents come to the school saying that he's trying to radicalize our children,
Right.
that will also be an issue. Right?
I doubt if parents pay that much attention to civics. I mean, people don't pay attention. I literally, I will basically tell you that if you ask questions to adults from this book, they have no answers. Like, you read this chapter.
I did.
Yeah.
He studied, we can tell.
If I came to you tomorrow and asked you this, wait, I'll just pull out a question and write whatever. State 2 reasons why historians refute the claim that the British introduced the rule of law in India. You will know shit, right? Or what is rule of law? Tell me, right? So now you know because you've read this. But essentially, if you ask adults, it's a simple answer. If you have read some stuff or you're just generally aware, you can give answers. But it's a sad situation. And that is the big reason why we are doing this podcast.
Yeah.
So Shreyas, I think you should take over from here and talk about the fun part of this chapter.
After a break, because I haven't studied enough, so I have to revise more. Consider this equivalent to taking a toilet break in between a test just to see your chit. So it's just that. Let us take a cheating toilet break quickly.
We will come back and talk about some comics.
Welcome back to How to Citizen. We have Abbas with us today. Abbas, we are going to try something impossible. We are going to try and analyze a visual medium on an audio podcast. But in this podcast, what we say is we always do the impossible. That's our motto. So
exactly.
Let's do it.
Wait, that's our motto now?
It's not.
He keeps changing the motto, man.
So what were your general impressions? Do you want to give our listeners or our viewers, since you are going to be painting an image, an idea of what this cartoon is like?
Okay, so there's a part in the chapter about they want to simplify how laws are passed. And someone thought, hey, it's an 8th standard textbook. You know what would be amazing is if we took the rejected panels of the Indrijal comics, essentially reprinted them with other word balloons. So they have like a three-page comic comic book, rather mini comic book, that tries to simplify and tell us how laws are passed. So the protagonists of our comic book are two very elegant women by the name of Kusum and Shazia. Like you can tell these textbooks, this comic hasn't been updated from the 1960s because the names are Kusum and Shazia. And if you see, Kusum has white streaks in her hair, so she's way older than Shazia. How are these two friends is the first thing that came into my mind. And they're reading a newspaper called The Daily. It's just called The Daily.
The Daily.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed something about Shazia.
Yeah.
In a few panels, she has dyed her hair.
Yeah.
In few panels, she's completely white.
Hey, Shazia has the right to fashion, okay? She can dye her hair whenever she wants to, in whatever panel she wants to.
So, it takes the example of the domestic violence law, am I correct?
Yeah.
So Shazia and Kusum come across a law which they think is not up to the mark. It's not guaranteeing the safety of women who get abused, who have domestic abuse issues. So they go and try and raise awareness of this. But if you look at the comic strip carefully, all the panels where they are sad, they have the same faces, and the panels where they are happy, they have the same faces. Like it's literally a copy-paste job that they have done. There is a panel for public hearing where they are raising awareness, where all the women in the audience are in Ghungat.
Ghungat,
Yeah. And there's a parliament which features somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
And and then there's there's a panel of people who are sitting and discussing the draft, I guess. And if you see, it's clearly out of like the fashion sense doesn't scream out 2015 or 16.
No.
It's clearly...
It's the same, basically.
It's the same.
Yeah.
I mean, considering the law was passed in the 90s, I doubt people dressed like that in the 90s.
Yes.
But I also think if you're dyeing your hair every 10 seconds, if you're changing your hair color, that fashion style is decades and centuries into the future.
That's true.
We haven't reached there yet.
But they explain how the laws are passed, but I had questions about this.
Tell me.
Can I bring them forth?
Absolutely.
So I get the part where till the bill is drafted, where like many groups got together, they put down the points which they thought will make for a good law. But then it's not clear how does the draft reach the parliament, and which is the authority that accepts this and puts it into action, into it becoming a law. Like those panels weren't clear. We just see them handing over the draft to someone. It's not mentioned who it is. And the next thing we know is that the bill is in motion, right?
So I think the one interesting thing that this comic does is it has to do a job of not complicating it too much, right? I mean, like when they are saying, for instance, that the bill was introduced in Parliament, right? It has to be introduced either in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, which they explained in the previous chapter, but
I haven't read that one.
So the thing is that when you are drafting a law, it has to be introduced by a specific ministry.
Okay.
Right. So, for instance, like if there are many places where a draft can come from, right? You know, like a ministry can internally, like basically draft it. Some lawyers can draft it for them. But when it's introduced in the parliament, it has to come from a specific ministry under whose domain the law is. right? For instance,
Right.
like if it's a women and child related law, it will come from the women and child ministry.
Okay.
Right. If it's like a law on languages, like say changing the official languages, it will come from the home ministry.
Right.
And are there cases where it's not really clear which ministry it falls
It
under?
happens, and
Okay.
it has been happening. Like recently, also it has happened. It has happened in the past as well.
Like, what's an example?
Where, for instance, like when the finance bill was brought in at this point of time, they made changes to the RBI Act and Representation of People's Act, which comes under different ministries,
Okay.
right? So it does not come under that bill,
Okay.
right? Then Aadhaar Act, when they brought in, it's a subsidy delivery mechanism, right? So it was introduced by the finance ministry as a money bill. So that's a problem. Right?
So then who takes the call in that situation?
I mean, it depends from government to government, really.
Okay.
But I mean, it has to be a practice that, if this falls under your domain, this ministry is
Okay.
supposed to do it. Supposed to do it. I mean, but of course.
Are there any hacks or any ways to play the system? Like, are there any categories
Oh,
where
tons of
it's
them.
easier to get a law passed as opposed to some that are tougher?
Tons of them. I mean, you can come up with like precedents for thousands of things, right?
Right.
Like any government can justify anything, literally, right?
Okay.
Because for instance, like this government, for instance, we are in 2018 now, so you all know which government I'm talking about. Other day, Modi ji. So this government.
You mean to say this is relevant for the next 5 years as well?
Yeah. Hello, child from 24. You are listening to a dated podcast right now. We have an excellent shelf life. So the civics book did not change.
Yeah.
But okay,
yeah.
so basically what I was saying was that for instance 60 साल से ये गवर्नमेंट चल रही है,
Right.
उन्होंने ये गलत सब कुछ कर दिया,
Right.
right? Now this government is doing pretty much the same things,
हाँ.
right? Just that they're doing it in a very concentrated period.
Okay.
Right? So मतलब basically हुआ क्या होगा कि बीजेपी अपोजिशन में थी, कांग्रेस वाले आए, बहुत गन मचाई वहां पे, राइट? एंड बीजेपी वाले चिल्ला रहे थे ये क्या गलत है, ये गलत है, मनी बिल पास कर दिया, बजट ऐसे पास कर दिया वगैरह। अब नाउ व्हेन दे आर इन पावर दे आर लाइक, अरे ये सब हमारे साथ हुआ था, हमको तो लॉ बुक भी नहीं खोलना पड़ेगा, हम तो यही करेंगे। सो दे बेसिकली आर यूजिंग द सेम थिंग्स एंड यूजिंग द थिंग्स दैट हैपन टू देम एज प्रेसिडेंट्स टू जस्टिफाई व्हाट दे आर डूइंग टुडे।
Okay.
So I mean, it's a little tricky thing to sort of explain, right?
Right.
And of course they can't explain it to 8th graders because they don't want to soil the image of our democracy. Yeah. But I hope that cleared your.
So the lawyers, the ministry, it has to come from a ministry.
Yeah, ministry, yeah.
And then it directly goes to the parliament?
Yeah, it gets introduced in the parliament. So
Okay.
basically they put out a draft. Like
Okay.
for instance, right now there is a.
So the moment you say draft, I think of the Lokpal bill. There were a lot of drafts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like for instance, right now you must have heard of the data protection bill as
Yeah.
well. So that draft is out, right? So you can comment on it. You can send your comments to the IT ministry
Okay.
who is handling that.
Right.
Yeah. And when the Sri Krishna committee drafted it, there you could send your comments, which on the basis of which this draft was made.
And who reads these comments?
Nerds.
That goes without saying. But which nerds specifically? By the way, nerds are also the ones writing these,
Yeah.
writing the comments.
Nerds write it and nerds comment on it basically. No, but for instance, right, like here they show that these women are
Yeah.
clearly from a activist organization,
Right.
right? They're clearly from a women rights organization
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So they are the ones who are reading this because they are concerned about this. So for instance, I know someone, you must have heard of this lady, fabulous lady called Flavia Agnes.
Yeah.
Right. So she fights a lot of cases about where people have abandoned their wives and like whatever. So for instance, if a law comes which changes the divorce laws or whatever, so she has an organization structure behind her. So she will obviously be trying to put in her word or like make changes to the law. So there are specific buckets of people who will
Right.
be interested in specific issues. So it will always be that case. Like for instance, Lokpal
Yeah.
was a mass movement.
Right.
So everybody was interested
Right.
because corruption is affecting everyone. Yahan pe it's a very specific niche.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it's not that much of a niche, but
Yeah.
so that's essentially it.
Okay.
How do you get someone to care about a law that doesn't directly affect them?
What do you think of us? Can you do that?
I mean, if you see, take
We'll-
the
we'll-
377 as an example.
Right.
All three of us on this panel are straight men, right?
Yeah.
And yet I wanted the law that law to be scrapped
Right.
because I want equality for all.
Right.
It helps that I come from a minority religion, so
Yeah.
I have like probably one portion of the
Right.
discrimination that
Right.
they face,
Right.
where I have also faced. Yet I also am aware that I've come from a privileged family.
Yeah.
Right. But I care about that because even though I'm not gay, that law being shunned away takes us one step closer to equality for
Right.
all.
Right.
So that's one example of, I think, you create awareness about it. You tell people how if things work out in our favor, it also benefits you.
Yeah.
So I think
Right.
that
Basically,
might
that's
help.
essentially it. You have to personalize it. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, the Save the Internet movement,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
AIB was a part
Exactly,
of, right?
yeah.
So they made that video, and then suddenly it was all like, it felt like, oh, yeah, I should care about this. Right? So essentially, it's also about how you communicate those laws. So the government usually will never try to tell you what the law is.
Okay.
They will put it out on a website. They will say
Exactly,
draft
yeah,
hai,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So these activist organizations are the ones who actually inform you about ye law aaya hai, you should care about this.
Right.
Why should you care about this? Now they are starting to make videos. They make like fancy websites and
Right.
whatever. So
So
essentially,
I remember during the Save the Internet campaign, people were asked to log on to certain websites and things were already written out
Yeah.
for them, and they
Yeah.
just had to like say I agree
Yeah.
or I submit or something like
Right,
that.
right.
So you're saying these comments are then read by someone and accordingly
Absolutely.
changes
Absolutely.
are made or not made.
So essentially what happens, so like for Save the Internet is one option where you send emails to say try.
Yeah.
Like an organization which is directly affecting regulations.
Right.
Yeah, so that happens, right?
Right.
Where the laws actually are changed there. But वहाँ पे flooding हुआ था.
Okay.
ईमेल्स का काफी फ्लड आ गया था, उनका वेबसाइट भी क्रैश हो गया था, डीडॉस हो गया वो. But तो obviously attention मिल गया,
Right.
but also because of the immense pressure in the public is
Right.
why they cared about it.
So what about the causes or the laws which don't get that much attention?
Right.
Yeah.
So what, for instance, we did this campaign recently when I was working with an MP. We did a campaign to specifically also one of the reasonable restriction, defamation.
Okay.
We wanted to reform the defamation law because it's shit, right?
How did you want to reform it?
So it's now a criminal offense.
What's defamation again? Just in
Defamation.
one line.
Basically, if you say I am in a party
Right.
and you basically go to him
Huh.
and you tell him ki Meghnad, is getting funded by Dawood Ibrahim.
Okay.
Right? Whatever.
Maligning someone's.
And he goes and tells the media.
Okay.
So मेरा जो reputation hurt हुआ है,
Right.
so I can file a case against him जिसने
अच्छा,
भी publish
okay.
किया, जिसने
Oh.
उसका भी publish किया, so I can file
That's what
defamation
Arnab
cases.
keeps getting hit by
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
times.
All journalists.
All
All
journalists,
journalists. So it is a tool used to shut down journalists mostly.
Okay.
Right?
But what if you are just you just do defamed things and then people talk about your acts? Is that still defamation if it's just the truth?
So again, it's very arbitrary
Right.
right now. The law is not even defined. So that is the essential campaign we were doing कि इसको define करो. Plus people don't put people in jail for this crap. Make it like streamlined. Make it so that that you can file civil defamation cases. Don't remove it.
Right.
Just streamline it like they do in the US. You can sue people.
Right.
Okay.
It's like for like
So no
certain
criminal
amount of-
action, only
Only civil,
Right.
civil, right? So what we did there essentially was that we created a draft bill. We wrote it ourselves.
Okay.
The MP I was working with was the one who submitted it, introduced it in Parliament as a private member's bill.
Okay.
Which means an MP himself, instead of a ministry, an MP can also present a bill.
that's also an option.
That's
Okay,
an option.
okay.
We wrote it ourselves and we introduced
Okay.
it. And then we started creating a campaign around it, which is that this bill is now in the Parliament. If you want changes to it, please go to this website. And यहाँ पे we had like annotation tools and etc. Very good. But then we also had like explanations for every section,
Okay.
where we are giving examples of Shah Rukh Khan did this in the
Acha,
party,
okay, huh.
so he can get defamed.
Right.
Or so like it's in simple words we were trying to do it. So these sort of things you can do. So this is evolving. This process is still evolving. Is what
Cool. You know what would be interesting? Maybe if these comic strips actually featured celebrities, then the children would actually take
That's
more interest.
actually an interesting
rather than
idea.
Kusum and Shazia.
Yeah.
Like it's Shah Rukh ka naam hai.
Yeah. Rohan and Tanmay are having a conversation one day. Like, That'll be fun, man. That'll be fun.
They don't even have to fictionalize it. Can just be snippets from life.
And then a panel can be where Rohan is talking to Tanmay. Oh, Tanmay, फिर से FIR. But yeah, so it's a fun comic, guys. Do read it.
Okay, I have a slightly off-topic question.
Sure.
Abbas, we were talking about how in this comic there are frames where they're always happy and sad the same way.
Yeah.
Do you think every time you are happy,
Yeah.
you're happy in a different way, or every time you are sad, it's specific and individual to that point?
Yeah, it's different.
It's different always.
The intensity of happiness and sadness
Right.
diversifies.
Diversifies.
with each event. Yeah, it's not the same. But I guess Kusum and Shazia are just so jaded with everything.
Yeah.
that
When your
they're
name
like-
is Kusum, you have to be jaded.
Jaded.
You have no option.
It's not even like a cool TV serial
In
name
Maharashtra,
anymore.
she would be Kusum Tai.
Yeah.
Like Kusum Tai. Like when she's born, she becomes a Tai.
I actually like the name Shazia. I like names that have Z's.
The
Z's in
moment
them.
it was a Shazia, I was like, I hope it's not Shazia Ilmi. They didn't take their
You
inspiration
should change your
from
name to
there.
Shreyas.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I
That'll
will.
be fun.
Maybe I will.
Abbas.
No, I'm happy with
Abbas.
that.
Should that be a mission statement of our podcast? We try
And
to
change
get
it.
everyone to change their names and add Z's. Z's in there.
Citizen already has a Z though, so.
How to Citizen.
Citizen.
Yeah. The podcast has a Z in it.
You mean house to the citizens? More Z's.
So, like, we will go to the last section now.
Sure.
Right? Because we've had a very long and fun conversation, and now we will go to the unpopular, controversial section of the the chapter. Basically, it's just title unpopular and controversial laws. I mean, like, I'm not saying this. The
textbook
book
is.
Yeah. So now here's the thing, right, Abbas
Yeah.
and Shreyas, you have to answer this. When you were in the school and you never polished your shoes,
Wow,
Abbas,
okay.
you look like the kind.
Okay.
And Shreyas never did his hair and his shirt was always tucked out.
Always.
Because gunda tha.
But I checked other people's shirts and ensured that they were tucked in, if that counts for anything at all.
Alpha भी था. छोड़ो, ये तो पूरा arbitrary power लेके, मतलब arbitrariness का हद कर दिया. If you were a British, you would be the one coming up with sedition, right? And applying it everywhere. No, you would be the one with Rowlatt Act. We also know Rowlatt Act.
It is like if you are an authoritarian regime, Rowlatt Act, sedition, all these are masterpieces.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
Like sedition just allows you to squash any opposition to any law ever. So it basically allows you to.
So I have to ask, like, is there no way that these can be modified or changed?
And it's funny because whoever has been charged with sedition in the last 3 years, I think some 362 cases, if I'm not wrong. I haven't checked the figures yet. But it's something close to that. Only 2 have been convicted.
Okay.
So
Who have
basically,
been the
they
2?
mostly get squashed. Like for instance, the JNU thing, charge them with sedition, they're roaming around. क्योंकि कोई charge-sheet file नहीं किया. I mean,
so you go through that whole endeavor of getting beaten up in courts.
I
and
mean,
all
you
of that.
you get branded.
Yeah.
That's the essential thing that the sedition law has been reduced to now. Like basically, तुमको sedition क्या traitor.
Right.
Traitor.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if someone curses you on the street, that's not the law's fault.
Yeah.
It's kind of.
Which have been the 2 convictions? Which have been the 2 convictions?
I'll
do you
have
know?
to check. This is just off the top of my head right
Okay.
now.
But in general, can laws be updated? Like we saw 377 get scrapped, right? So how long does it take for a law to be
So
modified?
Supreme Court has to sort of like 377 was scrapped by the Supreme Court when
Right.
it went to the Parliament.
Right.
Where
They didn't let Shashi Tharoor speak.
The bill was not even introduced.
Yeah.
They laughed it out, right? So it was terrible. So that didn't happen. So which means the court, when it first upheld the law, they had said Parliament को निकालना है. फिर Parliament ने हंस के भगा दिया.
Okay.
फिर अब Supreme Court ने फिर से आके बोला अच्छा ठीक है हम ही करते हैं.
Okay.
Remove it. So it takes a while,
Right.
clearly, right? So basically unpopular and controversial laws.
Right.
So 377.
Now that's a pop. No, that was an unpopular law. No.
I mean, it's
The
not
scrapping of it is
popular.
that popular, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, the scrapping of the law was popular,
Was popular.
not the
The
law.
law
That's
itself
what. That's what. I clarify. I'm very happy that law has been scrapped. This is not the ambiguous statement scheme. I'm very clear with the fact that I'm happy.
So when I was reading the unpopular, I don't know if I'm sure Meghnad will remember. I don't know if you remember, but in 2001, 2002, there were a series of events that happened. Like 9/11 happened, and the parliament attacks happened. Then the Godhra riots happened. So there was this thing called POTA, which was being circulated around, which was something similar to
Prevention of Terrorism Act?
Yeah. Which I think implied that a person can again be punished without being tried.
There is one
That's
more.
the Rowlatt Act. That's like the Rowlatt Act, right?
There is another UAPA. Which is being used against these activists which were arrested right now.
Okay.
Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Right?
Okay.
Again, same blanket. Like
Without trial.
Without trial. Yeah. So they can be arrested and. No, but if you are say basically these activists were accused of liaisoning with Maoists.
But then even someone like an Ajmal Kasab got a lawyer and he was tried. So are they trying to imply that these people are more dangerous than terrorists which came from across the border and gunned people down in broad daylight?
There's a very interesting sort of thought experiment I would like to give you here.
Sure.
Right. To actually test whether the law is popular or unpopular, more or less. So there's this thing called basically when you are a part of a state or a structure, right? All laws are equally applicable in an ideal situation, right? But what it also does is that the authority which is making those laws, it has the power to throw you out of that system. So whenever you are convicted of something, your fundamental rights are taken away. So if you're thrown in jail, you become a Zoe. They call them a Zoe, right?
Okay.
Which means that all of your original rights as a person are stripped away because you are not allowed to live in that society which has those laws, right? So for instance, like when you talk about Ajmal Kasab, right? Essentially how the law is working is that Ajmal Kasab became a Zoe.
Okay.
Right? And how the law is also working is that these guys who were accused of earlier is also a Zoe, right? So there is no distinction there for the law itself or the structure itself, right? It's for the people to decide basically whether this is right, this is wrong. What was it vindictive, was it not? And
but
then
in
unless
one case, one of those two is getting a trial and the other is not, right?
I'm not aware of this actually.
No, like you said, the activists who were arrested, you're saying they are under a law which can punish them without them going to trial.
UAP, and they can be arrested. They can be arrested is what the is, and they can be detained for I think 6 months.
Okay.
Without any charge sheet being filed.
And in those 6 months, the police can do whatever they want with them in jail.
I mean, the investigations are going on, so they are there, and they'll be asking them questions.
Okay. One small question about when you say someone's arrested, the basic rights don't apply to them. How does that, so for example, during war, if someone's captured, you have the
prisoner of war.
The prisoner of war. So there are certain, what are those called? The Geneva Convention says that you can't torture them and so on and so forth. So when someone's arrested, what rights does the prisoner have so that they don't get tortured, or are there any such laws?
So there are basic human rights which have been defined, but then it's up to the country ultimately whether they want to implement it or not.
And where does India rank in there?
I don't know the exact ranking, but it's a convention.
Okay.
Geneva Convention.
But that's specifically for war, I think. I'm not aware if it applies to someone who's arrested for like a...
I'll also have to look this up a little bit. It's a little beyond my scope right now.
Aren't we at war already? Am I missing something?
We are at war with ourselves.
Never ends.
Okay, but we are going to end with a very simple thought, right?
Okay.
Which I want both of your quick comments for, and then we will end this. Basically, in that section where unpopular and controversial laws, like we spoke about right now, in detail, clearly we know what those are. I'm guessing, so I'll skip that part. But it's basically what the chapter says, that it is our right to criticize that law, right? And it says people might criticize this law, hold public meetings, write about it in newspapers, report to TV channels, etc. In a democracy like ours, citizens can express their unwillingness to accept repressive laws framed by the parliament, right? When a large number of people begin to feel that a wrong has been passed, then there is pressure on the parliament to change this, right? Taking from, I think one of you raised this point about how to make laws more popular,
relevant and popular,
more
yeah.
relevant.
Yeah.
So, do you think the parliament reacts to these campaigns anymore, or do you, in your perspective? I know you might not be following the news. That's not the question. But do you think these sort of campaigns work anymore? Just a general question. Or are we like too lazy now to do anything?
I think it's when we put enough pressure. When there's a fire burning under the government's ass, that's when they get up. Like, I don't think lighting a candle is going to do that. I think a fire, there has to be a forest fire.
But I think the last real fire I felt which led to an actual law being implemented was not even Lokpal, Nirbhaya. Right? And is it like, are we in this situation where we have to see horrific incidents happening?
I was just going to come to that. If it's going to take a case like a Nirbhaya, which was absolutely atrocious, inhumane treatment of someone, then it's a problematic thing, because we can't expect things to go to that extreme for us to be able to change things. Also, I think I think politicians will go to any length to justify or protect what's happening. Like, for example, we see so many lynching cases, right? And a lot of the leaders from the ruling party have made, for example, when the Asifa case happened, people went to the length of justifying that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to justify or imply that what happened wasn't that big of a deal, how much of a noise are you going to make for those kind of people to have a reaction to that?
Absolutely.
They are more concerned with their ballot boxes, with their coterie of people who will vote for them, and they'll say anything, do anything to please them and to please their own. So I think it's a very hard fought, like Shreyas said, it has to be on like level 10. The amount of rage or the amount of opposition has to be at an extreme level, and that's not possible to happen every 3-4 months. Absolutely. Like, even the people will exhaust themselves out, like kitna protest karega, how much will we raise our voice,
kitne wrongs ko right karega hum. That's essentially it.
So I think it's unlikely to happen, but again, that is no reason to not protest
exactly.
or make noise about that. Yeah.
But I think okay, I will just end with one quick thing. I think one thing that they have not, and I think this is not updated obviously, when they say etc, they also mean internet activism. Internet, social media based activism, right? So do you think social media based activism can change laws? Like, do you think, because for instance, like the Nirbhaya and plus say Lokpal, right? If it was a movement, let's call it a movement, it had TV involved. Media was going crazy about it day and night, showing shit, like whatever. But now it's more internet driven, right?
Yeah.
But do you think people, because Not in My Name, if you like look at it, that was an internet driven campaign at the end of the day.
What was Not in My Name?
Against lynching.
Against lynching, yeah.
So some people gathered in Delhi.
Yeah.
Jantar Mantar. Yeah. Right. But do you think that works anymore?
If you're asking, does online rage now translate to on-ground rage? I would say that is starting to happen.
Okay.
I think seeds of that are being sowed. Online rage in isolation, maybe not, but like, for example, someone fired at Umar Khalid, right? So that is a combination of TV, internet, a bunch of things. But internet is a big part of it. Internet is canvas for them to spread fake propaganda about someone, and that, I think, it is starting to happen. We should take it seriously that these things now affect people in real lives on ground, and they do act upon stuff they hear and see online. I think that's true.
That's wonderful. And I think we will end our podcast here. If you have any questions for him.
No.
Do
you feel that you understand the laws, Abbas?
This conversation made me understand laws much better than the textbook did. So I think if the chapter can be the tool, starting point, the tool that will incite people to have conversation. So yeah, sure.
That's a great thing. Acha, we have to score him now.
Oh really?
Yes. Because among friends, we score each other. We are sitting in the chair.
Here's your score, bro. तो टेंशन मत ले. तू शायद पास हो जाएगा.
मैं इसको देता हूँ 400 में से 30 mark.
Around about average Joe marks.
Tough school, man. If that's the average Joe. Tough school.
Average था अब fail हो जा.
Just because I didn't quote Kant. Give me 30 out of 400.
I'll tell you why you didn't get the marks. I mean, you had the answers, you have everything, but you haven't cut your nails, man. That's why you lost
You
everything.
did not obey the law. I mean, what the hell? I have a bias against you now. No, but thank you so much for joining us, Abbas.
My
I
pleasure.
hope that was fun
Yeah, it
more
was
than
a lot of
anything
fun.
else.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for producing our podcast.
Oh, no problem, guys.
That was a great episode, and I love how our producer is also a part of the guest.
Yeah, I feel it's more like a guest is a producer. That's
Yeah.
how I think of it.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, where do you want people to follow you?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Abbas Momin and on Instagram Abbas Momin 88. I have a fan page which has exactly 106 subscribers, likers, fans at the time of this recording. So just search for Abbas Momin on Facebook.
Let's
and
get
you'll
that to
find
1,000 guys. Everyone, please like it.
Let's do this. If I get 500 likes, guys, I'll release a stand-up video.
Oh, yes, guys. Oh, you have to do it now. Go
500
to
likes.
Facebook, find Abbas Momin, follow him so that we get to see his stand-up.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Everyone like it. If you want to follow me, you know what? Just don't follow me. Follow Abbas's page. I don't have any material to release. But on Instagram, you can follow me at @Shreyas_Manohar, on Twitter @Very Shreyas, and on Facebook, I have a fan page by the name of Abbas Momin, just like that.
Yeah, I also have a fan page on Facebook called Abbas Momin.
Amazing.
So please like that, and I will also release Abbas's stand-up video there.
You'll share it. If it gets 1,000, you'll share it.
You can follow me on Twitter at Meghnad, and you can follow me on Instagram at Meghnad S. And that is it. You also have to follow and can follow and must follow IVM Podcast on IVM Podcast at Instagram and on Twitter at IVM Podcast. They're the same everywhere. And please leave your ratings on this podcast. Please give us a 5-star rating because because fun tha.
Yeah.
Kafi fun tha. Right? Right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So please do that, and please, we want to hear what you think about our podcast. Even if you want to curse us, please feel free.
Yes.
And also, if you are listening to this podcast and you have your Instagram app up, just take a little screenshot and put it up on your stories that you're doing this great deed of listening to How to Citizen.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye.
So that was our episode this week. Next week, join Meghnad and me as we talk to RJ Rohini Ramnathan about the judiciary.